Whenever I talk about DaVinci Resolve, an alarming number of you continue to say that you're going to get there at some point, but you haven't bothered learning it yet. This is your sign to start learning DaVinci Resolve now. This is how to make a basic video edit to get you up and running as quick as possible, and then you can slowly start migrating from your existing video editor over time. But this will get you out the door making a basic video. This video is brought to you by the 90s. Wait. The Stream Deck might be a control interface from the future, but Elgato has sent it back to the past with the limited edition Atomic Purple version. Just look at the color. To the eye, the plastic itself is very close. That's crazy. Please bring transparent tech back. Control your stream, your lights, your graphics, or any other program on your PC or Mac with the Stream Deck Atomic Purple Limited Edition. Now on discount for Amazon Prime Day, linked below. When you first open DaVinci Resolve, you were greeted with this project manager. Do not be alarmed. I know this can be pretty intimidating if you have not used an NLE or video editor like DaVinci Resolve before. You're not starting your project and choosing your settings yet. You have this whole manager, and instead of saving individual project files, all of your projects are here, and you can make databases based on year or channel or whatever and keep them in the sidebar. As an example, I have my cloud library that I use in the DaVinci Resolve cloud. I keep a library here so I can sync it across computers and do some other wizardry with it. And if we look at this library, you can see I have projects going back like 2 years because I'm super lazy and don't bother making new libraries. But you get the idea. Like, you have all your projects here, which makes it a little easier in some respects and a little more intimidating in others. With your individual projects, you can open them, you can rename them, you can export them if you do want to keep backups of the individual project files or send them to someone else. You can export project archives, which will include files that are in the project as well, set up project backups and remote rendering servers and all sorts of stuff. We have some videos on some of that stuff in the channel as well. We're going to go ahead and make a new project. You can do that by right-clicking or by choosing new project down here. I did also real quick want to mention you can organize projects in folders as well, which is pretty neat. So I'm going to make a new folder for tutorials, and I'm going to make a new project, and we're going to call this Tutorial 1 Basic Video, and create. And then it's going to open DaVinci Resolve, and it's going to take you to the cut page. And oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about here. So this is DaVinci Resolve's main UI. I am on Mac here, but it is pretty much identical across operating systems. You are presented with very similar layouts to most video editors. You've got your video preview in the top right. You've got your media pool in the top left-ish and your timeline at the bottom. There are a bunch of other controls and things you can access, and of course you have your menus at the top. At the bottom, you have a bunch of different workspaces or pages. They're called pages in DaVinci Resolve. In Premiere, they're called workspaces. In Premiere, I never really used these. I never really cared about them at all. I didn't find a use for it. I just loaded up all my panels how I wanted in Premiere in the main window, and it was fine. In Resolve, you don't have quite as much customizability to move your panels, which are these little chunks of your UI around, and customize them. And so using the different pages is somewhat useful. The media page is kind of where you would expect to start your flow. I don't know why it doesn't take you there by default, but this is where you can import your video files. You can import them on any of the pages, really, or at least the first 3 here, and kind of the first 4. But this one's more for directly managing video files. So if we import some video here, so I'm going to go ahead and open up my video projects folder, and we can import this 3DS footage. I can just drag it in, and it's going to prompt me to change the project frame rate. I am going to interrupt the entire flow of the video right now to say don't change, and then undo the import, and tell you need to set up your project settings before you actually learn to edit. And that is really frustrating, and I don't want to do this. But unlike Premiere or Vegas or whatever else, you can't really change your frame rate for your project after you start editing. You can change resolution, you can change just about everything, but frame rate starts to get locked after you import so many clips or start editing a timeline. So under File, Project Settings, timeline frame rate needs to be changed here. Right here. We're going to choose 2997, which is the drop frame time code or drop frame frame rate for 30 FPS. And I use a lot of camera footage. Anything recording from pretty much anything from a real camera or captured from an external device through hardware is going to use the fractional frame rates. So that's 23976 for 24 frames a second, 2997 for 30 frames per second, or 5994 for 60 frames per second. You can choose whatever you want here, and Resolve will adapt your footage to your target frame rate however you see fit. But you want to do this before you start importing footage, or you're gonna have some issues when you start trying to edit and export, because you won't be able to export in a different frame rate. So if you leave it locked at 1080p 24 frames a second here, and then you go to edit and export, you're gonna be mortified that all of your edits and your entire video timeline is locked to 24 FPS, and you can't really do anything about that other than start over. There are every once in a while that will let you change it, but for the most part, it gets locked. Now, it's gonna be really annoying to remember to do this every video. So I'm going to click save, change, and notice it said you can't change that again. I don't understand this limitation. It's insane. And once you have done this here in your master settings for your project settings, click these 3 dots in the top right. Now you have default preset. You can set up presets like your sequence presets in Premiere if you've used that. You can set up presets for all of these settings, and we will cover these settings in time. But what you want to do is whatever frame rate and resolution setting you're going to use most often, 3 dots, set current settings as default preset. Update. Now, every project in that project library that you're currently in, so my local database here, every time you make a new project, it's going to default to these settings. That way you don't have to remember every time. That is a crucial step before we go back to actually learning the program. We can import some footage. It's still going to prompt us to change frame rate because the footage I'm importing is a different frame rate than my project timeline because it's 60 FPS and I'm editing at 30. I'm going to say no because I'm going to keep editing at 30 FPS. That's fine. And you can see here I can preview my media. This is the playhead, so I can scroll here and scroll through the footage. I can hit play to just play it normally. I can stop. I can tell it to loop the footage. I can set in and out points, which means whenever I drag it onto a timeline, it will start at the point that I set the endpoint. So let's say I wanted to start right here. I can right click and say mark in or use the I key on my keyboard, I, and you can see here it changes the view that the timeline looks, and then I can go down here and click O, and those are my in and out points. So now when I drag the clip on the timeline, it's only going to show that chunk instead of the whole clip. Very useful for sorting through your footage. You can, of course, drag these and change them as you need to. If I say, okay, I want it over here, I can hit O and go over there. You can right-click your clips in any of the pools, but, we're focusing on the media management here. You see you got your audio playback if you had audio channels on your video clip. You got metadata, so you got your resolution, your frame rate, all of that jazz. Over here on the right, you got more properties. So you got the codec it was recorded in, frame rate, resolution, whether there's audio, time code information, whether it's interlaced or progressive, all that kind of stuff. Lots of useful information here. But for the most part, you can just import your photos and videos. You can see here I have a still, a JPEG, as well as a video file. And now we're ready to edit. Now, I'm going to tell you up front, I do not use the cut page. And if you're used to editing in most traditional video editors, the cut page is not what you're used to either. We're going to revisit it at some point, but for the case of just making a basic video, we're going to go ahead and jump over to edit because you can do all your normal edits here. And this is the page that most closely resembles your standard video editors, your Premiere Pros, your Final Cuts, your Vegases. You got a bunch of different panels and they may not all be showing at first. So I'm going to go ahead and you may just kind of look like this. So over on the left, you've got your media pool, which again, you can import clips, manage clips, do everything here with your video clips, still images, graphics, whatever. You've got a preview monitor. So if I double click a video, I can preview it and still set my in and out points like we talked about, as well as do some other changes. I've got my program monitor, and this is what's actually going to be on the timeline. And then I've got my timeline view at the bottom. So if I go ahead and make a new timeline, I'm going to hit Command N or Control N on Windows. We're just going to call this gameplay test. Now I have a timeline. I've got a video track and a stereo audio track. So I can drag on my video clip. This one doesn't have audio, so don't worry about that. And you can see here over on the program monitor, this is what's actually in the timeline. If you don't care about the preview monitor, you already do that in the media page, or you just don't want to mess with it at all, you can click this square in the top right-hand corner, and that is going to center and focus on your program monitor. I tend to go back and forth between them depending on screen space, especially because we're going to open up some more panels soon. This is great. We can play the video with spacebar or the play button here. We can zoom in and out on the timeline with these controls, the plus and minus slider here, or I have personally mapped S and D, because I'm a gamer, WASD, to S and D, zoom in and out on my timeline on the keyboard. And you can access your keyboard customization by going to DaVinci Resolve or the File menu on Windows, Keyboard Customization. And here you have a multi-layered, you can control every keyboard shortcut for every page in the program and every context that it's in. I'm going to go over here to my S key. You can see here it shows two different places that commands are interested in. One is when I'm messing with gallery project stills, which we can showcase later, and one is just the main application. If I click to it, it zooms me over to where that shortcut is over here, and I can type in a new one. It's going to tell me if I'm overwriting another keystroke. I'm going to hit cancel. I can get rid of that one. I can add a new one. I can reset it, all that jazz, and click save. And you are going to want to save as your own keyboard shortcut. And I highly, highly, highly recommend, if you are coming from another video editor, to go edit a video or a test video in that video editor and figure out what your most commonly used keyboard shortcuts are, and then come over here to your DaVinci Resolve keyboard customization menu and move all those shortcuts over. That's going to save you a lot of time and headache. So this is your general timeline. I can zoom in and out. I can trim my clips by just clicking the little edge here and dragging. I can add crossfades. If we zoom in here, I can grab that little shape handle and drag it in, and that's going to be a fade in. And the same thing at the end, I can add a fade out. You can drag it pretty much as long as you want. And it's just going to fade to black or whatever is underneath it. If you want more video tracks to start stacking layers or effects, you can right-click and either add track if you right-click in the general space, or you can click add tracks and add multiple audio and video tracks here. You can mute any given video track by clicking this button, the disable and enable video track option, or you can mute audio tracks with the M. You can solo audio tracks with the S, which is going to be, if you have a bunch, you can just listen to one audio track. Standard stuff, but this is nice, pretty cool. You have your standard controls over here. So this is your normal select tool, which is just your standard cursor, so I can move clips around. You've also got your blade tool, which I have mapped to C because that's what I was using in Premiere. And this is how you would start chopping up a clip. And then I can hit that and delete it. Or for me, F is ripple delete. If you like ripple deleting, that deletes the clip and moves the other one over. That can save you a lot of time. Control Z, of course, undoes things. Something else cool that you can do is if you made a cut and you don't want it, but you don't know if Control Z would undo another change you've already done, you can click to where you get this little bridge icon here for, trimming any of these individual clips. And you can either move that cut along, assuming they're the same clip, of course, or you can click it and then hit the backspace key and it will just get rid of it, which is great. You also have your snapping controls. So snapping allows you to quickly snap to the end of the timeline, snap to other clips. So if I drag it close, it's going to boom, snap there. All sorts of stuff like that. If I turn it off, it's not going to have any magnetism here, and it's just going to let me freely do whatever without assisting me, which for some precise edits, you want to turn it off, or for like audio trimming, but for most things, you want it on. And then there's a linked selection. So if we import real quick, and I'll show you, you can also just drag from Finder or Explorer. So I'm going to go to my video projects folder. We're going to pull up a camera clip. This one will have audio. If I drag that in here, boom, with the linked selection tool, every time I click one, it drags over the audio with it. But if I turn that off, now if I click the video, it does not bring the audio with it, which can be useful in some scenarios, but can obviously, as you can tell, cause some problems with audio sync if you start dragging one when you're not supposed to. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Delete is to just remove clips off the timeline entirely. You can add markers, either with these buttons here or the M key on your keyboard. Markers help you add, you can double click it to add notes, like find effect for this, and you can add different colors. You can also use this for chapter markers if you export those to YouTube in the delivery page, which is great. Basic stuff here. But let's say, for example, I'm editing this 3DS gameplay footage, but I don't want it to be like that. Double clicking here, I can't seem to get any ability to control things. What gives? Well, below your player, and this is going to show up in both the side-by-side view and the normal view, you have this button right here. This little drop down gives you a lot of different overlays for how you can interact with your program monitor. OpenFX will allow you to interact with specific video effects, as you'll need to move like anchor points or focusing or something like that. Fusion Overlay, similar situation for interacting with fusion effects. We just want the transform effect here. I'm going to show you how to do this, but I don't actually like doing it this way. But you can then use your normal transform tools to resize. But you can see here, if you use the side handlebars, you're not sticking to the correct aspect ratio, and this is just annoying, personally, as someone who... I used to use this when I was very used to Premiere, but now that I do things in Resolve, I don't know. It's not for me. So instead, we're going to come over here to the very top right where it says Inspector. And this is the same thing in every video editor. Click it. It gives you this panel here to then give you all of your transform controls, cropping. You got a dynamic animating zoom. You can do speed changes, lens corrections. You can change retime and scaling algorithms, which I'm going to show you something really cool in just a minute. Those kinds of things. So I'm going to make sure my clip is selected, go to the inspector, and zoom all the way in until it fills the canvas here. And we're going to drag it down. And obviously, this is not the same aspect ratio as the 3DS, but it's fine. Now, you may notice, the keen eye among you, we got some artifacting here, because this is a pretty low-resolution native 3DS recording. And I just blew it up to HD or 4K or something. So we got some weird scaling artifacts. But this is a very lossless pixel art recording. And so we can actually preserve this. If you're doing any sort of screen captures or pixel artwork or whatever, if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the inspector tab, under retime and scaling, resize filter, you can choose nearest neighbor. And boom! Look at those crunchy pixels. This is before blurry garbage, after nearest neighbor. Now, I would like them to implement an area filter, which uses nearest neighbor up to the closest integer scale, and then bilinear the rest of the way, but this is as best as we can get that I can tell. But that looks so much better. You also have options for scaling to fill, crop into the canvas. This affects how it fits in the canvas itself. You can do stretch to stretch it out, but we're just going to leave it on normal because we have already resized. You also have motion estimation options here. So if you want to slow down footage to do slow-mo beyond the frame rate, like what the frame rate supports, you can use optical flow and things like that to really make it go super slow-mo. You've also got image stabilization, all sorts of stuff in here. Over here on the bottom right, we have our audio mixer. If that's not available, at the top right, you have these buttons that will show these different panels. This one toggles the mixer. So you can drag it based on the number of audio tracks you have. So we're going to go ahead and bring in that video camera scene. I'm going to go ahead and trim it up here. And we're just going to do a quick little edit like this. All I'm doing is using the blade tool, making cuts, and then deleting the clips. And for this one, to hide the jump cut, we're going to punch in a little bit. And I'm going to resize it with our inspector panel. Now when I play it back,
Humans have been doing that for hundreds of years.
we get audio in our mixer, and we can hear it. Something you will notice is it's only coming out of the left ear because of the way my camera records. So if I want to fix that, I can right-click the clips in the timeline, go to Clip Attributes, and you can do this in the Media Pool too. I recommend doing it before you import footage. Go to Audio. You can manipulate the video like crazy in here. But for audio, since it's only coming out of the left channel, we know the left one works, but the right one doesn't, we're going to reassign the right channel to the left channel so that it is pulling the left channel audio to both sides. Click OK, and now when we play it back,
Shining a light on a product or person is boring. Humans have been doing that for hundreds of years.
boom, we get audio. And here you can manage your audio levels per track, assuming you have multiple tracks, mute them. You can add audio effects, all sorts of stuff. So now I'm going to walk you through just editing a basic gameplay video. The video itself will actually be nonsense, as I haven't recorded anything recently that I can show you, but I'm going to walk you through the exact process I would use to edit a very basic video that uses multiple tracks. We're going to use some gameplay for this, and we're going to do some audio effects and some basic stuff. Now that I've shown you the basics of the UI, I'm going to walk you through step-by-step what is needed. So I'm going to make a new timeline. I'm going to click over here in my media pool. I'm going to hit Control or Command-N. I'm going to call this SW Hunters. And this is going to be our gaming video. By the way, you can have multiple timelines opened at once and quickly swap between them. You need to click this little check icon here and then click Display Stacked Timelines. This never remembers in between projects for me, and it drives me insane. It used to in older versions of Resolve and no longer does. So now if we click back to our gameplay tab, We can keep both of these open if we wanted to copy paste things between them or edit different videos at one time or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and make this. I'm going to go to File, Project Settings, and I'm going to set my resolution to 4K. We are already locked to... Actually, I'm going to do 3840 by... Yeah, we're going to do 1920 by 1440 because my gameplay footage is actually 4:3 from my iPad. So we're going to set it to the resolution that my footage is. If you want to know what that is, if you know you've recorded something weird like from an iPad or something, you can figure that out in the media pool. So we can see here each of our clips shows a resolution. We've got my camera clip, which is 4K, 3840 by 2160. We got my 3DS clip, which is 400 by 480. And I'm going to import some Star Wars Hunters gameplay. We'll drag that one in there. And you can see here it is 1920 by 1440. It is reading at 50 frames per second, which is not correct, but it's fine for now. So I'm going to go back into the Edit tab. I have imported this extra footage. I'm going to drag through and find some cool moments to highlight. I'm going to hit I on my... So even... I should clarify. This is the program monitor when we're in the timeline, so you can see here nothing's here. But if you double-click a clip in your media pool, it brings it up in the preview monitor, even though it only shows one at a time. So that is useful, so you don't have to have both up at the same time. So I'm going to scroll through. Looks like we completely switched matches here, so I'm going to start here. And hit O as my out point. And now I can drag this clip from the media pool onto my timeline. We have our gaming footage.
Time runs out.
Using S and D to zoom in on the timeline. It could be plus and minus for you, or you can use this keyboard or mouse option over here. I mapped it to S and D. All right, next I want to overlay some camera footage, talking head on top of my gameplay. I'm going to double click my camera footage here. I am going to find where I want to showcase. We're going to start there. I'm going to hit I to set my endpoint. And we'll come out here-ish to set my out point. You can always retrim after the fact in your timeline, regardless of what your in and out points are. So you don't got to stress too much about that. Something else I can show you is when you have a clip open in your media pool to the preview monitor here, you can still change your inspector settings. You can see here the title for it is media pool and then the file name. So I can set scaling to fill. So it's going to fill in the frame without me having to resize it. Very handy. You can also do whatever you want there. So very, very handy that you can do that without dragging it into the timeline. I'm going to go ahead and drag that over top of my gameplay. You can see here, as long as I drag it to an above track, we typically get our second audio track down here. You can see here I have nowhere near enough camera footage, so we're going to extend this. But my camera footage has a lot of mistakes, so we will want to trim out those gaps. But first and foremost, now my camera footage is covering my gameplay, so we need to do something about that. Now, there are effects from the likes of Patrick Sterling, good buddy of the channel, and some other fine people on the internet that will do picture-in-picture effects or whatever. If you want to access your effects, by the way, top left, next to Media Pool, you have Effects. That'll open a whole separate panel of a whole world of effects. We can dive into what a lot of those mean in the future. In the meantime, I can see, do I have... Yeah, so Patrick Sterling has the Picture-in-Picture Pro plugin. So I can drag that effect onto my clip, and it's going to automatically make a little mask that I can then resize to fit over top of my gameplay. I want you to be able to hit the ground running with this without downloading extra effects for now, so we're going to do this manually. I'm going to click my clip in the timeline, and we're going to zoom it down. And we're going to open up the cropping menu, and we're going to crop the left. And we're going to crop the right. And we're going to crop a little bit off the bottom. And a tiny bit off the top. And we are going to move it over here to the left-hand side of the screen. I'm using the left-hand side because my eyes are facing inward here. And with the typical audience viewer eye direction rules of composition, you want your eyes to be directing your viewer to the bulk of the content. If I set it over here, then I'd just be pointing you off screen, and it'd be really awkward and uncomfortable to watch. So now I have my little floating camera here. And if you have access to the open effects filters in Resolve, there is a built-in drop shadow that we can pull up. I am not seeing it in my effects menu, so I can click the search icon here and search a drop, and then drag the drop shadow effect to my camera footage. You can also click the star icon here to add it to favorites, and we now have a whole favorites panel here that I can pull it from. Now with the drop shadow, I get a special effects tab of my inspector for my camera view. I can change shadow strength. I can change the angle that it's facing. I'm going to move it over this way, and I can adjust the distance. Boom, just a little bit of shadow to separate me from my game, and I don't like that I'm blocking the head of my guy, so I'm going to move me up just a little bit. I don't want to block the kill feed either, but I think that's okay. But now we got to contend with all of my error spots. So I'm going to use my blade tool to cut out those spots. I'm going to use the backspace key instead of ripple delete so I don't move my main track. To delete that, drag it over. Same thing over here. Zoom in, make some cuts, delete that clip, drag it over, zoom out, zoom in, cut, cut. Oh, I clicked to second cut. That's fine. I can select both clips by clicking and dragging. Backspace to delete, and then drag my clip over. And then we have some extra tail here that I will just extend my camera clip to fill. Now, my voiceover and my camera footage is going to sound horrible because I did not sync it up with external audio. I can show you that in a future video. So in the meantime, I'm going to use a filter to process my audio. And since I have multiple clips, instead of adding that effect to multiple clips and redoing my settings each time, you can add effects to individual tracks. So if you click the track itself, you're automatically presented with some basic controls. Volume, and then there's all the new AI audio effects built into Resolve Studio, such as voice isolation to help remove background sound, dialogue leveler to help even out your audio, dialogue separator, and some music stuff, and blah, blah, blah. We're not going to mess with these just yet, but I am going to drag on a VST, which is called Isotope Via. I have a whole video about why this improves your voiceover for your videos linked in the description. I'm going to drag that over to my voiceover audio track, and I'm going to hit play to play my audio so it can analyze it. Close. I'm going to solo my voiceover track so I can just hear that and hear what it sounds like.
Cheap looking effect.
Oh, we made a mistake. I made a mistake. I did not, when I showed you how to change the clip attributes to make sure our audio goes to both channels, I only did it in the timeline, which means when we made a new timeline and I drug that clip back over, that effect of making sure my audio was on both sides did not apply to my new timeline. If you want that, you have to apply that in the media pool itself. So I can right click here, click clip attributes, and make sure both channels are using the left audio. And then it will update every timeline. But since I only did it originally in the timeline itself, it did not update this one. So now I have to, select all of these clip attributes, embed channel 1 for both left and right. And now we'll hear how it sounds.
Light itself ever be visible in camera.
There we go. Perfect. But now our gameplay audio is too loud. So we can use our mixer, which again, you can toggle in the top right. We're going to use our mixer to bring down our gameplay to like minus 28 decibels. Usually fine. Let's play it back, see how it sounds.
Complete 360-degree lighting or a half and half bisexual lighting extravaganza.
There we go. I can turn it up a little bit. Now, you can actually rename any of these individual tracks. So I can rename video 2 to cam, video 1 to gameplay, audio 1 to game sound, audio 2 to VO for voiceover. Now, I just manually drug the whole audio track down for my gameplay. Resolve comes with some ducking tools that I covered in that aforementioned video about Resolve Audio that we could use to automatically kind of bounce my my gameplay audio below my voiceover. So I'm actually going to turn it back up to where I want it to be when I'm not talking. Which is about fine. And then we're going to click the track and we're going to turn on the ducker. Now for the source, you want to choose whatever source you want it to hide behind. So in this case, I want the gameplay to get quieter when I talk, so I choose my voiceover track. And then the duck level is how much more it reduces once you start talking. So I had it at about minus 20-ish decibels when I wasn't talking. So we're going from basically negative 10 to negative 20, so we need to reduce it by 10 more. And then we can adjust the look ahead and whatever. I cover all of that in the video that I mentioned linked below. We're going to look ahead a fair bit. And now we'll try.
Fully enveloping a product in color, complete 360-degree lighting, or a half and half bisexual lighting extravaganza. This is a baby dragon, however. It's fire.
That's sounding pretty good. So if I want to add any additional effects, I can of course find them in our effects window here. So if I go to the standard built-in Resolve effects, I can, for example, we can hide my camera for a minute to show something in the gameplay. So let me find a space where I get a kill. So I'm going to hide my camera entirely by disabling the video track. Boom, I get a kill there. So I want to make sure my camera isn't showing when I do that. So I'm going to add a cut. I'm going to re-enable my camera. I'm going to add a cut here. And then I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard, or Option on the Mac. And I'm going to click and drag this in. The reason I'm holding Alt or Option to do that is because if I just do it normally, it's going to drag both the audio and the video. Although in this case, there we go. Yeah, if you have your normal link selection, it's going to drag both. But if I hold Alt or Option, it's only going to drag the track I'm selecting. So I can show that kill. So then we can add an effect to this clip when I get the kill. So I'm going to go ahead and again cut out this little bit, and we're going to drag on an effect. I'm just going to pick one. I'm not sure there's anything directly relevant to what's happening in the game, but that's okay. In this case, we're going to do the drone overlay. So it's going to look like I'm zooming in on him. So I'm going to drag that on there, and you can see here we get this customizable little overlay. I want it to, it's going to inherently be on the center anyway. We are going to make the target a little bigger here, and we can change the color. That's a little bit of a color overlay. That's a glow. I don't care about that. The grid color is what I care about. We're going to make that pink. We're going to make the graphic blue. Nice. I love it. That's perfect. It's really all we got to do.
Self ever be visible in
And then I'm going to cut here after I get the kill, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Now, let's say you have you want to do this after the fact. You've already made an edit, and you want to come back and you want to change it. So I'm going to click over to my camera clip. Let's say I've already resized and done something else. If you're trying to find it, click on the clip you want to edit. So I'm going to click on it in the timeline. I'm going to go up to the inspector panel, and under effects, that's where I find the drone overlay effect. And I can either turn it off, but leave it there in case I want to bring it back or mess with it more, or I can click the trash can icon to completely delete it. Now, similar deal with transitions. Let's say at the end there, after my gameplay, I'm, for whatever bizarre reason, transitioning to my 3DS gameplay. So here I will demonstrate. I'm double-clicking the clip in my media pool to bring it up in the preview monitor. We have our in and out points. I'm going to go ahead and zoom all the way in on it so that it fills the screen. Get it exactly how I want it to look, and change the resize filter. And then I'll drag it onto the timeline. That way, you know, I save myself some steps here. I'm going to cut it, trim it, and we want to add a transition here. I'm going to go ahead and find my video transitions, and there are lots of ones baked in, lots of ones you can find and download from a variety of creators or paid applications. We're going to use the Mosaic pixelization transition. I drag it to the in-between to the cut point. Did you see that? I drag it specifically in between here, and it shows an overlay over both clips. And then you can grab the handles and make it go faster or take longer, depending on your liking. I'm also going to shorten by holding Alt, my camera feed, and then I'm going to use this handle to make it fade a little bit as we get to the mosaic. That way it's not awkwardly on top of this transition. Now I can click on the transition itself here to change the effects of it, and we can just change how many pixels there are, basically. You can also animate it with these keyframes if you'd like. And boom, now we're transitioning to Pokemon. Let's say I want to import some music from backingtrack.gg, our free video and stream safe music. I can go ahead and import some of that goodness. Not from there, though, because that isn't working. Nope, yes it is. All right, we're just going to bring in Chip Rock, random song, not a big deal. You see here we get waveform previews. You can set input in-points and out-points like always. And I can drag it onto an audio track. That was way too long, so I'll just cut like normal. And then I'm going to bring it in a little earlier since the gameplay stops here, and fade it up. And we're going to click the clip, go to the inspector, come over here to volume, and we're going to turn it down to -14. We have now added effects, we've added music, we've managed gameplay sound and voiceover sound, we've added a camera with an overlay. We've made a basic video. So now I'm going to go ahead and export it. We could color grade it. We could go into the color tab, and you could start messing with your saturation. Ooh, really blow it out there. Your contrast, all of that. We will save color grading for a separate kind of dedicated video. But then to export your video, we click the Deliver tab at the bottom. By the way, if you don't like how much space this takes up, you can right-click and just choose Show Icons Only, which I do because I love as much screen space as I can get. And then we'll set it up to export to YouTube. H.265, network optimization. If you're on Mac, uncheck Optimize for Speed. Under Audio, you want PCM, 32-bit, audio normalization, YouTube. I have a whole video breaking down audio export settings and all of that, and, well, all my export settings linked in the description below as well. We'll choose a space for it to go. Tutorial video test, save, add to render queue, and we'll tell it to export by hitting render all. If at any point in time you realize something's wrong in your edit and you want to fix it, you can click stop, wait for it to stop, make sure it says render all again instead of stop, because if it says stop, it's not done yet. Go over here to cut or edit. You can make your changes. Let's say I want to show my camera there just a tiny bit longer. Then you can go to the deliver page and you can just right click your existing job and click clear render status and then click render all again. It's going to ask you to replace the video clip if it had already started making it, but you're good and you're good to go. Alternatively, if you've already added a render job or you've edited it or whatever, you can change it after the fact. So if we right click clear render status, we can click this pencil icon right here. And that will shoot it back over here. And let's say we wanted it to be ProRes instead of H.264. We can do that. I can say update job. And I can click render all. And now we're doing the same thing. Except now it's stretched out my video because it reset the resolution. I didn't notice that. Clear render settings. Go back over here. Yep, it set it to 1920 by 14 or by 1080 instead of 1920 by 1440. Update job. Now render all. Boom. And now it's going to export my video. I'll include a clip of it here, but obviously it's mostly nonsense since it's not a real video.
From more softly wrapping a key or fill light around a human face to fully enveloping a product in color, complete 360-degree lighting.
But that is what it takes to edit a quick video in DaVinci Resolve. I do want to show you one bonus tip that we will cover more in depth in another video. You can see here the first pass it did was to normalize the audio. Now it's doing the actual rendering. If you thought that was going way too fast at first, that's why. It absolutely was going way too fast. But you can see here I've got hardware acceleration on my Mac here, so it goes pretty fast. It took 17 seconds to render this 1 minute and 17-second video. But let's say, just as a quick test, you want to sync up external audio with your camera, like you recorded an external microphone. You can do that here. So if I go back here to video projects, where this came from, I've got my edited audio that I recorded on a separate field recorder. If I come over here and, for safety, clear my in and out points, if I select my camera footage and then hold Control or Command on Mac and choose my audio that I want to sync it to, right-click, Auto Sync Audio. We're going to choose based on waveform because I'm not doing timecode management here. And you can choose to retain the audio that was on the camera footage, but for the most part, you will have no reason to. So I'm going to leave that unchecked and click Sync. It's going to take a minute. And now if I drag my camera footage onto a timeline, I have the external microphone, which is going to sound a lot better.
Shining a light on a product or person.
If I undo all of this, I'm even just going to entirely undo importing the audio and drag the audio back in. Let's say I drag it onto the timeline. It's not going to be as clean, especially if you have cuts. It's going to be a big problem. But I can drag that audio onto the timeline and sync these up here as well. I can select both of them, right-click, auto align clips, waveform, sync. And generally speaking, this will still work. It's not as clean, and now I have both copies, so I either need to unlink them and delete one, or I need to just mute that track and focus on this one. And I need to link my new clips so that whenever I move my camera, I'm moving that one. But you do have the option of doing it both ways. And I love doing it both ways. Go ahead, get started editing. You're only going to learn by doing. You can only learn so much from tutorials, but I will have more tutorials on this coming soon. Y'all seem to be loving the DaVinci Resolve content. I've been editing in it for like 5 years now. I do hope you enjoyed. Links, like I said, you need to go check out my audio processing video and my export settings video to move on from here to really get a grip of the more kind of nitty gritty of mastering your videos. And then we'll come back and do some really cool effects and other stuff in the next one. Remember to be kind, rewind.